Die will ich wegnehmen.
So. Ja, guck mal links an, bitte. Nach links schauen wir zuerst. Ja, nicht im Porträt, ne? Und zur Mitte mal so langsam ein bisschen genau.
Einmal in die Ecke rein, alle. Einmal Mitte.
Hier ist die Mitte.
Alles zur Mitte, genau.
Was für ein Akku?
Brauchst du eine Kamera?
Ja, hau einfach drauf. Das stimmt alles. Nimm die Kamera und mach. Nein, du nimmst den Chips nachher raus und jetzt kannst du jetzt hier vorne.
Felix, wir brauchen ein bisschen mehr Ruhe. Ein bisschen mehr Ruhe. Felix! Haben wir noch nicht schon? Felix! Felix! Aber ganz kurz.
Felix, ganz rechts.
Oh, verdammt.
Einmal noch eine Geste.
Ich hätte gerne die Finger. Ich will mir andere Richtung gucken, dass ich die Finger auf der Augen.
Felix, haben wir noch nicht schon, bitte? Genau da.
Felix, kannst du noch ja, genau. Hier rechts einmal.
Und Felix, nochmal nach links.
Felix, einmal noch eine Geste.
Das war's mit dem Felix. Levy.
Sehr schön.
Beide haben wir nach links schon, bitte? Felix, beide links.
Beide.
So schön. Schaut mal zur Mitte, bitte.
Beide einmal in die Mitte.
Ganz da links. Jetzt links, genau. Und jetzt, was jetzt mit dem Kuscheln passiert?
Ja, das ist einfach zu spät. Du kannst einfach hochgepackt, weil Felix hinten rausspringt, wer auch will. Wer auch will. Nach rechts. Rechts zu den Kollegen kurz.
Ja, das ist wieder die andere Seite. Das ist doch Ärger, oder? Nee, ich krieg die Hände. Was ist dran hier vor euch? Olli, wie soll ich denn stehen lassen? Mach die kleiner zu groß. Sind alle zu groß. Wollen wir es doch mal hier probieren?
Zur Mitte mal, zur Mitte genau, ein bisschen.
Einmal alle in die Mitte.
Schrittchen vor.
Ein bisschen nach rechts. Ein kleines Stückchen nach rechts.
Ein Stückchen vor.
Einmal in die Mitte.
Einmal hier nach vorne.
Einmal alle 4 nach links schauen, bitte. Ich wollte witzig sagen.
Ja, noch ganz links. Hier zu dem Kollegen. Ja, hier.
Rechts noch einmal. Und noch mal rechts. Sehr gut. Der wird hinten zwischen die Jungs. Felix hier, bleib stehen. Seine Hand an. Genau, schön eng zusammen. Regisseur bitte streng zusammen. Schulter so. Hier in der Mitte fangen wir an. Jetzt lassen.
Felix, jetzt hast du die Kamera.
Ja. Was habe ich?
Felix, einmal in die Mitte.
Machen wir einfach. Ein bisschen noch rüber. Handstand bitte. Jetzt kommt ein bisschen noch rüber, dass du wieder eine Mitte hast. Ja, genau. Perfekt.
Und dann einmal drüber noch, dann habe ich so.
Und hier. Und noch einmal ganz gerade bitte.
Ganz gerade, genau.
Hier.
Noch jetzt mal in der Dreh, ab nach oben.
Christoph, Fabian und dazu. Sehr gut. Wieder zu mir mal Gisela von Wahl in der Mitte.
Einmal hier nach oben.
Bitte, bitte.
Einmal hier bitte.
Guckt, wohin ihr wollt.
So, einmal alle vier nach links bitte.
So, naja, dann klickt man noch hier rüber. Von Berlin hier, den nicht vergessen. Der von Berlin?
Ja. Aber dann rechts nochmal hier zu den Kollegen, bitte. Nochmal.
Einmal hier nach oben.
Felix und David, weil er das Buch hat. Wir zwei wieder aus.
Die Agentur Christoph Müller, Constantin. Fabian, Gasmia.
Gerne, ganz kleine und gerne die Hände vor. Einmal zu uns nach oben.
Aber nochmal hier in die Mitte. Dann hier in der Mitte. Felix, hier.
Das wäre euch ein bisschen gerade.
Einmal nach links, bitte. Einmal nach links.
Und ein Bild nach vorne, das ist von einer Linie. So ist der Mann.
So.
Und den Blick gehabt. Ja.
Thorsten. Und jetzt einmal noch die Ecke.
Hier,
Thorsten.
genau, die. Danke. Ja, genau.
Nicht nur zu Gisela. Thorsten hier. Einmal hier nochmal.
Das ist schön, aber klein. Nächste
Schritt vor.
Franzi.
Dann gerne mal ganz gerade zu. Franziska, einmal hier.
Und über die Schulter.
Einmal hier. Franziska. Einmal hier mal lächeln.
Und noch einmal die Kurve bitte. Und die Rosenfalle.
Heute die Ecke hier. Ja, super. Die Gerüchte sind wahr. Vergiss den Kollegen nicht.
Und nochmal die Kurve bitte.
Dreht euch ein bisschen ein.
Schau dir einmal hier nach rechts, bitte.
Noch einmal die Kurve bitte, alle beide. Kurve.
Dann einmal hier rechts. Einmal das große Strahlen, lächeln. Nochmal hier, ja. Beide nochmal in die Mitte.
Franziska, einmal allein zu mir. Franziska und wieder.
Ja, vielen Dank. Vielen Dank.
Wir treffen uns in 1 Meter. Wir sind kein Glück, war
Weihnachten bei dir, weißt du? Du hast mir deine Karte beim Hochfest von Bürgermeister gegeben.
Mit großer Spannung hier auf der Berlinale.
The Berlinale awaits the premiere of David Wnendt's latest film in the Berlinale Special Gala. He is a specialist in bestseller adaptations. Think of Wetlands or Look Who's Back. This time he has taken on Felix Lobrecht's autobiographical book Sun and Concrete, also a huge bestseller, which takes us to Gropiusstadt in Berlin, an area of social hardship. This film is also full of tremendous violence, but at the same time it's a film about shrewd young people who survive between the precipice. Above all, it stands out because of its speed, because of this incredible tempo, this fast-paced energy, but also because of excellent young, very authentic actors. The press conference for David Wnendt's new film, Sun and Concrete.
Alter, behindert geil die eine aussah. Ey, denkst du, ich kleine Nummer von der einen, ich schwöre. Ja, vergiss, denkst du, kennst mich doch, ja? Ich hab immer Weiber am Start, ich kann gut mit Mädels. Du bist hier, sie ist da. Denkst du, ich klär das, ja?
Aber die kriegst du nicht schon.
Die krieg ich auch noch. Pass mal auf jetzt. Ey, Mädels, ich bin Möbelpacker, ja? Kann ich dir beim Ausziehen helfen?
Nein.
Ey, wollt ihr nicht heute mit uns rausgehen?
Wir sind doch schon draußen.
Ja, mit uns, Mann. Vielleicht irgendwo hin oder so.
Wer mit uns? Wer ist denn uns?
Wir machen heute Party, Mann.
Oh mein Gott.
Was laberst du? Du springst das Missgeburt.
Was ist denn los mit euch, ja? Ey, ich schwöre, ja, eigentlich würde ich sowas wie dich gar nicht ficken, Mann.
Nein, was ist doch nicht mit Lass den Hund. Peinlich,
Alter, Julius, Mann. Ich schwöre, richtige Nutten, ja? Ey, ich kenn den nicht, ja?
Ja.
Ihr könnt mit mir rausgehen, wenn ihr wollt.
Kruse rum in der Stadt, Hermannplatz, Weg ist gesperrt. I live where I'm from, I love where I'm from. Sonne und Beton.
Herzlich willkommen zur 73.
Welcome to the 73rd Berlinale and welcome to the press conference for the world premiere of Sun and Concrete. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome our guest at the far end of the table. We have Fabian Gasmia, the producer. Jieun, who was DOP.
Franziska
Wulf, one of the actors.
Maldonado-Morales,
also from the cast.
Rafael Klein-Heßling,
Klein-Heßling.
Vincent Wiemer,
also one of the actors.
Levy Rico Arcos,
Another of the actors,
Felix
Lobrecht, who wrote the book upon which the screenplay is based,
und David Wnendt, Regisseur.
and David Wnendt, the director.
Ich beginne mit einer Frage.
I'd like to start by putting a question to you and then I'll open up for questions. Congratulations on this marvelous and important adaptation of a bestseller novel on a very particular, special story about Berlin.
David, Felix und auch
I
Fabian
wanted to ask
ansprechen, weil
this
ich
question
wissen
to
wollte,
David,
wie-
Felix and
erstmal, ich finde,
Fabian.
Ihr habt eine ganz schöne Geschichte. Ihr habt ja gerade Seven Elephants Produktion gegründet.
You've just set up
Und,
Seven
seid dann
Elephants as a
über das Buch,
production
gekommen. Da wollte ich
company,
kurz fragen,
and then
wie ihr
you
beide
started to
den
work with
dazu
this book. So I
kamt
wondered
und was
how
euch,
you
so
started to
begeistert
work
hat, dass ihr
together
dann
and what made you so
einen Film
enthusiastic
machen
about this
wolltet.
book. Why did you want to make the film adaptation of it? Oh yes, Fabian and I discovered the book, each of us on our own, because we liked the cover. I read it and I thought it was fantastic because it's so particular and it's so sensitive, describing what it's like to be 14. If you don't come from Gropiusstadt, you can nonetheless really identify with it. And the book manages to show that it's not about just gangsters and SWATs, but it's much more nuanced than that. I didn't know Felix back then, actually, as a matter of fact. So I really only got to know him through the book. We then got in touch with Felix and talked with him, and we got the rights, and then eventually the film was finished. And he thought it would be a bit faster, and now after 4 years it's finally completed. It all took a while, but it was a wonderful journey that we set off on together. Well, yes, it's actually even 5 years later, as a matter of fact. There were 6,000 sales of the book. There was a lot of interest from the entire sector. And there were all kinds of offers for much more cash for the film rights. But after a meeting where we got to know each other, you actually opted for the lowest offer, ours, because you thought that it would make the most uncompromising film. And perhaps that really is the case, because otherwise perhaps it would have just ended up on the TV, not even at prime time. That's not what we wanted. We wanted exactly what we made. Well, yes, I'm still dreaming occasionally about all that cash, but and I'm not. They weren't going to give it to the ARD, but to the ZDF. But I've had bad experience with them, I have to say. Greetings to them. You might know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it really was just how David and Fabian described it. I gave Seven Elephants the film rights because after our conversation, which wasn't terribly long, it was maybe an hour and a half and 45 minutes of that I was actually eating. It was venison, as a matter of fact, I remember it well. And I immediately had the feeling that they had really grasped what the book is actually about. I felt that they were aware of what is most important in turning it into a film, so there was no question for me whatsoever. It was much better to give it to them rather than to a larger production company. After all, I didn't intend to earn heaps of cash with it. I really wanted the film to become as good as it has indeed become, and I have to say it's even better than I thought it might be back then when we reached our agreement. And you were fairly intensively involved in the whole process of all of writing the screenplay. Well, yes. I had a clause in the contract that I'm allowed to be involved in the screenplay, and David, I think, thought that I was joking. But then we went away writing together for weeks on end, and he realized I wasn't joking at all. And was it a good process? Well, yes, it was indeed a great process. We had to get to know each other first of all, but we found a good way to work together as well. Felix has a great feeling, of course, for language, for dialogues. What I try to do is to look at the structure and the filmic language, so we really complemented each other. And you changed it a little bit and extended it, didn't you? Well, yes, a novel's not the same thing as a film, of course. You can't just film the pages one after another. It's different. You look at a film differently than you read a book. You watch a film in one go. So there's a lot you have to change. You have to shorten some things, remove some aspects, some of the ancillary figures became more important as well. Yes, and the book's told in the first-person narrator perspective. And of course, when you're reading the book, you just hear the thoughts and the observations of the narrator, which is Lucas, and in the film you got a lot more different figures that you have to know something about. So it was a very creative process because we had to think about all the different roles for the figures that you find in the book and think up backstories for them and write dialogues. I was quite naive. I really just thought that we just had to turn the novel into screenplay language, but actually it was almost as much creative work as when I wrote the book in the first place. And if I've understood correctly, you also grew up there, right? So perhaps it was very much an issue for you that the place was really represented properly? Well, yes, Gropiusstadt is clearly one of the lead roles in both the novel and the film, and it was important to me to convey authentically how I experienced living there, and I think that that worked very well in the film as well. And also in the book, I tried to make it as precise as possible so that the names of the streets are accurate. You can actually walk the routes that are in the book, as a matter of fact. Are there any questions?
My name is Mahari Sigit, African Refugee News. I saw the film yesterday, so I had the time to go and make some research. It's really a very, very important film to show how these young boys work together to commit a crime. But my question is, how was the casting of these young boys? Because they're really great.
Thank you.
Of course, the cast was really very... Also das Casting war wirklich sehr, sehr wichtig natürlich.
Well, the casting really was very important. And we tried to find young people from across Germany. We had an online call via Felix, and thousands of people applied. They sent in their own videos as well. We went to all of the schools in Berlin and talked to people on the spot. And we met kids in shopping malls and on playgrounds and such like. We got them there. And we wanted really to cast it as well as possible. And all of the young people really had to be the right ones in the casting. We tried to really find out that they could do what they'd have to do during the shooting. And I have to say I'm absolutely delighted and proud that we found the right guys and that they play such an enormous role in carrying this film. And all the best to Ada, and congratulations, because that was our casting agent who put so much work into this. In fact, it was an entire team of casters who were involved. Ulrike Müller, Jacqueline Rietz, Ada, and also all the others in the entire team who were involved in the street casting. It was a big process, the street casting. Any more questions? Well, perhaps I could ask a question for the actors. Could each of you say a few words about how you found your way to the film, how you ended up being in the film? Let's start off with that, if we may.
Levy? Yeah.
So, go ahead. Do you have to talk into this thing? Yes, right.
Well,
David was just explaining that there was casting calls in lots of Berlin schools, and that was the case in my school as well. In fact, it wasn't me who was contacted, but a friend of mine. But I wrote to the Sun and Concrete page on Instagram and asked if I could come along to the casting. And that's how things got going. And I went from casting to casting. No, my friend didn't actually.
Und kanntest du das Buch schon?
And did you know the book already at that point in time? Had you read it? No, hadn't. Fortunately not.
Ja, bei mir war es über Felix.
Well, it was via Felix, actually. I didn't know the book, but I'd only listened to the audiobook. And then I was looking at Felix's Instagram account, and I spotted that it was going to be filmed. And I applied to an open casting, and I went to 3 casting appointments in Berlin. And then for ages I didn't hear a thing. I actually thought that was that, essentially. I thought, well, I've been unlucky after all. But months later, all of a sudden they called me and said, "Do you still feel like being on board for Sun and Concrete?
Also bei mir war es durch meine Schwester,
And
weil
for me, it was via my sister.
hat sie das seiner
She's a fan of Felix,
gesehen.
and she saw it on his Instagram page and showed it to me, and
Lass uns machen.
I said, yeah, let's go for it.
Ja, dann ist er aber ein bisschen in Vergessenheit geraten.
And then we kind of forgot about it, I have to say.
Ein halbes Jahr später
6 months later, I remembered about it and we applied. Well, I applied.
Und ja, wurde dann zum Casting in Berlin eingeladen.
And then I was invited to the casting call in Berlin. And I was lucky enough just to have to go to one casting call in person. And then me now?
Bei mir war es so, dass eine Klassenkameradin aus der 3. Klasse mich
genau
den
one of my
Streetcaster weiterempfohlen hat.
classmates who recommended me to the streetcaster to Arda, and I went along to the street casting on my bike, and I came back and I thought it was great, and I did it again. And then I also forgot about it after a while because I didn't hear anything for absolute ages. I thought that was really that. And then I got this phone call when I was asked if I wanted to do it.
Ja, David hat mich angerufen und
David gave me a call and asked me if I wanted to take part, and I read the book and said, yeah.
Du warst ja auch schon mal bei David dabei, ne?
You've already worked with David, haven't you? Yes. In his film.
Und wie war, also
er ist wieder da, Look Who's Back.
Also dann das Buch gelesen, was war so eure
So you
Reaktion?
read the book, you read the screenplay. How did you feel about that? Were you intimidated about the idea of playing these roles?
Wie war es dann für euch, als ihr gemerkt habt, okay, das
How did it
das Thema des
feel
Films
for you then when you realized what the topic of the film was and what your role would be, what your character would be? I thought it would be really cool. I thought the book would be fantastic. I hardly ever read. I didn't actually read the actual book, but I listened to it on Spotify instead, and I thought it was absolutely great. I don't live terribly far away from Gropiusstadt. It seemed really authentic to me, so I was absolutely tickled pink. And I have to say that I didn't really grasp that I'd really be in the film. It was only when I was on the set that it really hit me. That was my impression.
Ja, bei mir ungefähr so ähnlich.
Pretty much the same for me as well. I read the screenplay.
Natürlich erstmal versucht, die Rollen nachzuvollziehen,
and I tried to understand the different roles and grasp what was happening inside this young bloke, why he acted like that, why is he the way that he is, what's the driving force inside of him. When I was in Gropiusstadt, though, that was when I really realized what it meant to live there. The really decisive moment for me was the one in the living room, because it was such a filthy mess. It was so dirty and disgusting. And that's when the penny dropped, and I thought, oh, okay, that's how life can be there. That's what it's like, and that's how the characters act towards each other, and that's why the film is the way that it is.
Ja, also ich habe das Buch dann auf dem Weg nach Berlin zum Casting
Yes, well, I read the book
und ich fand meine Rolle
on the way to Berlin, and I thought my role was very interesting because it's entirely different from my real life. I live in a village.
Aus Gropiusstadt, der
and it's a boy from Gropiusstadt. He has to deal with domestic violence day in and day out, and that was something that I found very intriguing in the role.
Ja, das war's eigentlich.
And that was it, really.
Die Frage war, wie
what was the question?
reagiert haben.
How we responded to the screenplay?
Ich habe erstmal auch das Hörbuch gehört.
Well, first of all, I listened to the audiobook. I didn't read the book either. And then when I got the book as a gift from Felix, I did read it.
Ich habe es nochmal angelesen.
Well, I started reading it anyway.
Meine Rolle hat mir sehr
And
gefallen,
my
vor allem, weil sie halt
role
auch
was one I really liked because I could really identify with the figure.
Locker ist und ziemlich lässig drauf.
And it's so laid back. He's quite a cool guy, so I was pleased about that. I liked it.
Meine Rolle hat sich eigentlich erst so am Set dann entwickelt.
My role really developed, as a matter of fact, on the set, through all of the improvisation that we did, and I felt a bit like my colleagues, that they felt that this spot, this part of the world, is very fertile, very fruitful when it comes to developing a character
in diesem Milieu quasi
and feeling what it's like to live in this sort of context. Another question from the audience?
I have a question for the cinematographer. How hard was it to film when they were in action, because they're new actors, so they don't know exactly how to move, or how did you manage to take this perspective of the children? And then I have a question for the script player. I just want to know how much of the book did you have to take away that hurts you?
Soll ich zuerst antworten oder erst?
Ja. Shall I answer first, or no, Jieun first?
Erstmal, ich war auch tatsächlich beim Casting auch dabei.
Well, I was also involved in the casting. It was a very important process, and luckily, David invited me along as well. So thank you for that, David. And that gave me an opportunity to grasp what it's really all about. And as the boys are all non-professionals, I got to know them. And during the casting, I realized that there's something that's a bit tricky. I don't know how to put it into words, but when you see it, it really is a bit tricky. And when we started shooting, for us and for David, first and foremost, but also for me, it was very important that we do everything together. Sometimes you do the cinematography and you're somehow alongside everything, but in this case we were really involved with all of the actors. We really were entwined, entangled in the whole process. I don't really know how to put this into words, but we were really together. Perhaps I can say a few words because I've been involved in a number of films already, but I've very rarely seen somebody give their all quite so much as our DP in there. She is, without artificial light, with the camera on her shoulder, with her platform shoes on. She always goes right into the scenes, and she went through all of those shooting days of principal photography, 59 entire days. I really hope that we can work again. She was great. She was tough. I've seen the film. The images are stunning, often without artificial light, without anything. And if I don't get to work with you again, I want to be your agent. I have to say, great cinematography.
Fabian, willst du auch für mich antworten? Spaß.
Fabian, would you answer for me as well, maybe? And be my agent? No, hang on, I'm just joking. So the question was about the screenplay and how much I had to remove from the novel. Well, I don't think it was so much a case of taking things out of the novel. We had to tone some things down.
Auch gar keine Ahnung davon hatte, wie man ein Buch
so I wrote
schreibt oder
2014, 2015. I didn't really know what it means to write. I just wrote. And it was only when I started working with David on the screenplay that I realized that there's a whole host of characters that you don't necessarily need. So we deleted some characters or compressed the ones who were 4 people in the novel and turned them into just 1 character. And I have to say that we actually really added a bit as well. I learned a great deal about dramaturgy. I learned a great deal about film and how it works differently from novels. Those were the issues. It wasn't so much that we had to throw out thousands of things. Perhaps one question on the cinematography as well, and perhaps David and Jieun could answer as well. When I saw the film, it really struck me, without this being a direct visual reference, but I did think of the aesthetics of Trainspotting and of Lola Runs. Were there particular films that you talked about, or particular painters or photographers that inspired you in your staging and your direction? Well, if you look at the film, and if you think about how you can express this in filmic language, it's quite legitimate to talk about films that you have as your model that are in this kind of genre as well. There were a few as well. There's La Haine, there's Trainspotting, and what I think is really great here is that nonetheless there is this filmic humor. There's delight in the production design and the look of the film, the feel of the film, and there's a lot of zest in this as well, this joie de vivre as well. We tried to find our own way, but that was very important as well. And of course, at the same time, it's important to say that the style emerges through the filmmaking process. It was very important to be close to the actors and to offer them a lot of space and freedom as well. That was important. That also creates the style. Jieun, would you like to say something as well? Working on Son and Concrete with David was was wonderful, and there was a real click in my head when I realized a great deal of striking things about what it means in practice. Things that you learn in theory were suddenly real in practice. There's the question of color and beauty, and the issue of what's beauty and what's ugly can really be turned on its head. And David said to me, well, why don't we be a bit unconventional in what we show? It sounds a bit banal, but it really helped, and it was really striking to think about what this all means. And we looked at a lot of music videos shot with mobile phones, and it wasn't so much about optical beauty, about traditional aesthetics. It was much more about how very close we are to the figures, to the situation. And that really helped me to advance and to make headway. If I've understood correctly, you were in Gropiusstadt, you pretty much lived there. And how did you get on with your neighbors who lived there the whole time? We had a very good relationship with them. We shot a lot in Gropiusstadt. As in the novel, we tried to implement this on the spot. We were there together for the whole summer. And the whole of Gropiusstadt gave us a helping hand to make the film, from the guy who sells the doner kebabs to the district mayor who got us the film authorizations, and the local housing department who helped us to get a flat. And there was all these young people who played all kinds of bit parts, and we had all these extras. And of course, there you are with your film crew and your cast, and you make a great big enormous noise, and you take all the parking spaces. And I'm sure that not everybody was delighted that we came along. I'm sure that some people were happy that we left again. However, on the whole, I have to say that it really was a film in and with Gropiusstadt. You really do feel that, and that's something I particularly like about the film. You have this feeling that it comes from the inside. You can feel that in the novel as well, but I think you really implemented that very well. Well, yes, it really is something that was dear to our hearts for all of us. From the actors to the cast and crew, all kinds of people helped as well, the local rappers on the spot as well. And there's various different groups who created their own music videos as well. All kinds of people were inspired and were creative. Felix's novel has set so many things in motion, so it was a really important personal project for all of us. And people can see that now we're really getting going, and we've been invited to the festival as well. So the film's set in 2003, and back then it was already entirely apparent that the world of politics had left a lot of people out of the picture when it comes to education and other issues. I don't want to get into politics too much because the film is also a piece of art and it's entertainment, but nonetheless, you have to think about local politics and national politics. You can't help but think of that when you see the film. How do you feel about that? Well, I wouldn't want to view it as politician bashing, certainly. There are problems in Berlin. There's a great deal of poverty, class differences, social tensions. It's up to all of us to work on that. You can't just say it's the politicians who've made a mess of everything. There was a lot of tension back then, and there still is. There are these enormous divides in society. We saw that when we were casting as well and talked to the school kids who were there. There's some from some parts of Berlin who go off on trips with their school. They do special project weeks, and then a kilometre away you've got a school where it's like being in hell on earth, where people are afraid every single day of being mobbed, of being beaten up. And geographically it's very nearby, but they're entirely different universes, very close, right next to each other. And the question is how to connect these two. It's not straightforward. It's a lengthy process, and it only works if we're on board. It's not just up to the politicians. I found it fascinating to see that this is a so-called problem neighborhood, and if people talk about that, you only really know it from the perspective of some rappers. It sounds cool, but rappers tend to tell you about how tough they are and who they've beaten written up, and that's that. And I found it fascinating to talk about the life of people who just live there and aren't such tough guys, just kids who don't really have any proper prospects for the future and who have a hard time, who don't have much cash, who come from difficult family backgrounds, who've got trouble at school, and who have this day-to-day struggle. And I thought that was much more interesting than yet another story about selling cocaine by the kilo, because there's much more points of contact actually for people who are not from those neighborhoods. If you live in some small city in Baden-Württemberg in the provinces, then perhaps you can nonetheless identify with particular individual aspects of people in the film. Much more that would be the case if you had this kind of real Pablo Escobar gangster film that's a way bit over the top. Then it's quite clear it's not anything to do with you directly, but I think because the actors are all so authentic and they perform so well, and I think that everyone can find something to identify with, irrespective of whether you grew up in a semi-detached house or on the 13th floor of an apartment block. But the kind of problems and family difficulties that kids have is something that all kids at that age have. Thank you.
Ja, leider müssen wir jetzt schon aufhören.
Unfortunately, we have to stop. We've run out of time. Can I say just one more thing before we do?
Ihr seid ja offensichtlich alle bei der Presse. Ja.
Now you're clearly all from the press. When you take a look at the film, and if you like it, please, it's going to be released on the 2nd of March right across Germany. Please do write good reviews so that people go and look at it, because it's something that is really dear to the heart of all of us. The film really deserves good reviews. The actors deserve it, and Stadt deserves it. So you've got the power to make it a great success. Please do give us a helping hand along our way.
Ja, und bei guten Filmen merkt man auch immer,
and of course, when it's a good film, you realize that you could just talk and talk. There's a whole host of questions I would like to hear from all of you about experience on the set and shooting. There's so much to talk about, but all of that will be discussed little by little. We've got the world premiere this evening with the red carpet, and then it's going to really be a huge hit in Germany. Fingers crossed.
Okay, Felix?